Emma Patwell.
Given the outcome of the Partygate inquiry, does the panel think that Boris Johnson's political career is finally dead and buried?
David T.C. Davis.
I think it probably is. I'm not saying whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I don't really see any way back for Boris. I mean, he's just left Parliament. He's resigned. He chose to do that, and that's fine. Any MP who's had enough can resign when they want to. Had he stayed, he would have been suspended for 90 days, so faced, well, possibly, that depends on how, but almost certainly would have faced a by-election. And therefore, I think that is the case. And I hope he's going to be remembered for the things I mentioned. I believe he was absolutely right on the Ukraine. He was right on getting the vaccine rollout sorted out, and he was right on Brexit. Somebody had to deliver Brexit because people had voted for it. And if I were Boris Johnson, I would want to be remembered for those things and not for the sort of unseemly rowing that's going on at the moment. We move on. We have Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who's doing, in my opinion, an absolutely fantastic job, delivering on the 5 pledges he made around inflation and growth and stopping small boats and cutting waiting lists in England where we can do it. And I want Rishi to be able to get on with the job and to be the Prime Minister after the next election.
So will you be voting for the committee report and with the suspension on Monday?
I haven't read the report yet, which came out this morning. I've been travelling around North Wales all day.
But I can tell you, I
haven't read the full 90 pages, and as a former Select Committee chair for 10 years, I do tend to do that before I make decisions. But what I can say is I have every confidence that the committee were doing the right thing. I have confidence in the committee and the people who are on that committee of all parties. So I can say no more than that. And the report, which I haven't read yet, I've read all the headlines about it, is clearly concerning. So I want to make it very clear that I respect the work that the committee have done.
And so when Boris Johnson calls it the deranged conclusion of a kangaroo court?
Yeah, that's certainly not something I would support at all, no. The committee members, long-standing members of Parliament, very experienced. They went into this in a great deal of detail, and you know, whatever people may think about Boris Johnson, I've already said I've got a lot of time for him on those big issues. And he saved this country, by the way, from Jeremy Corbyn. But the work of that report of that committee needs to be respected.
Lord Blunkett, actually, I'm going to call you David B, because that's what you've requested. We've got 3 Davids on the panel, so you're going to be TC, you're going to be David, and you're going to be David B.
Well, I'm very pleased that this David is so enthusiastic about the current Prime Minister, because you'll remember you voted for Liz Truss. So
you campaigned for Jeremy Corbyn, David.
I won't banter with you, but I think you'll find that I spent 3 years from the day after Jeremy was elected saying this was going the wrong way, and wrote and spoke about it. Anyway, that's by the by. What we're dealing with is this character, this phenomena, Boris Johnson, that has sucked the life out of the rest of the political arena and all the real issues that we need to deal with. And I've been reflecting over the last 7 days, and we've had the demise of Berlusconi. We've had Boris take himself out of Parliament, then blame everybody else that he's gone. And we've had Trump in court in the United States. I think we've had the dead, the departed, and the demented. And I think the sooner we actually come to terms with the fact that Boris had his go, he had his term, he had the opportunity during COVID, when he came out of hospital, to reinvent himself, to be a serious Prime Minister, and he didn't. And it's not the parties, it's what happened at the dispatch box. This isn't about whether people had parties and slurring other people about whether they had them during lockdown. This is a tradition as part of our constitution, that if, as a minister and as Prime Minister, you lie at the dispatch box, you have to go. And that applied to Profumo 60 years ago with the scandal over Christine Keeler and the Russian envoy who was having an affair with her at the time, and it applies to Boris Johnson. He set up, by the way, he set up the inquiry into himself. He actually was responsible as Prime Minister and with the Conservative Party for nominating the committee, including the 4 that made up the majority for the Conservatives. He was quite happy with Harriet Harman until things started to be unravelled. And he was quite happy, finish on this, because you'll nudge me otherwise, is quite happy to take £245,000 of public money to pay for, arguably, the most effective legal team in the country to defend him. And then he has the cheek to blame the committee, the Parliament, even his Conservative colleagues. He's only got one person to blame. It's Boris Johnson.
Lots of hands up. Let's hear from some of you. Yes, the woman in the pink dress in the front here.
I'm actually quite concerned by your response saying you think it should. It's not a think you should. He lied. As David Blanket said, the fact that he lied means he should never be an MP again. Is there no integrity left in politics? Is it OK to lie then?
Well, I can't stop somebody from standing for Parliament, and I can't stop them from being elected. What I've said to you is, I think his time in office is over. I wouldn't support Boris Johnson.
You said you think it is. You said you think it should be. It's
well,
not
yes,
I think it should
but
be. It's not a set rule for them and a set rule for us.
There is no set rule, but there is nothing to stop anybody, including yourself or anyone in this room, from standing for Parliament and winning an election. I have no say over that.
I guess what I'm looking for is more of a concrete, no, we don't expect
what
him
about
to
this?
be.
Do you think he should stand as a Conservative MP ever again?
Do you know, it's not actually up to me to decide who can.
It's not up to you to decide, but what do you think?
Let me be clear with you. I support Rishi Sunak, and I would not support anyone standing against him. And I've been very clear with you tonight that I think people should look at that report and understand that the people who wrote it are well-respected MPs. And actually, as David Blunkett just said, that report was that committee was set up by Boris Johnson, and we should respect their findings.
I'm not a fan of Boris. Think he told too many lies, you know, pathological liar. But I think Boris could make a comeback. And it's not because he's particularly special, but it's rather because of the inability of the establishment politicians to tap into what people want. Boris, you know, had his faults, but at least he spoke in plain English. He had a bold and clear vision, unlike his predecessor, unlike his successor, Rishi Sunak, who's just a conveyor belt politician. No real plan, just, you know,
Honestly, I think that's very unfair.
The woman at the very back. And the woman at the very back, yes.
Now that it's established that Boris Johnson has lied, what else has he lied about? Has he lied about Brexit? Has he sold us a big lie?
Gittin.
He was never going to go quietly. One of his favourite films is Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, so what's happened today was always going to happen. He'd rather go out in a, you know, flurry of bullets.
A bullet, yeah.
And,
well, he says he did not lie. The committee has found that he did lie. What's your view?
I think,
you know the man
without personally attacking the committee, I think anyone is entitled to question whether there's right due process when your political opponent, a former acting leader of the Labour Party, presides over a process that can actually deprive you of your employment for 3 months and indeed for the rest of your life. Now, if Keir Starmer, his beer and curry night with friends during lockdown, was handed over to Dominic Raab or William Hague to decide whether that was a breach, I would have a problem with that. I would not think that was a fair process.
But there are a majority of Conservative
MPs. It doesn't matter. This is not about the...
And the committee always has an opposition.
Game.
The committee always has an opposition chair. You know that.
This is a quasi-judicial process that should not be at the whim of the numbers in the House of Commons.
So do you disagree with the committee, then? Is that what you're saying?
I don't think
you're criticising it, so do you disagree with it?
People of their livelihood, you need to be beyond reproach. And the idea that the former leader of the Labour Party can decide, essentially, on the process and the outcome that drives out a Conservative Prime Minister from Parliament, for me, whether you like Boris or not, does not look like due process. And one of the things we throw overboard far too easily in the UK is the idea of innocent until proven guilty. The idea that you are represented by a lawyer when your livelihood is at stake. The idea that you have proper due process and the person who decides is above reproach. I don't think we met that standard on this occasion, whatever you think of the outcome.
He had David Panic, who's, by anyone's standards, one of the most outstanding barristers in the country, at our expense. And if he hadn't resigned last Friday night, he could have gone into Parliament on Monday and defended himself against the accusations that have been made against him. Why don't you think he did?
Nobody wants to interview for their own job, particularly under the horrendous situation that he would be in,
Well, Gita,
and be dragged kicking and screaming to a by-election and all that. So
Yes,
what he's done is taken control.
Let's be clear. Are you saying then that you do not agree with the conclusions of the select committee?
I understand why Boris feels sort of slightly cheated by the process, but more importantly,
But that's not
as this
answering the
young
question,
man was
Gita.
saying,
That's not answering the question. Are you saying the Privileges Committee is wrong?
I understand why there are questions about the process. What I'm more concerned
Okay, you're
about
still not answering that question.
millions of people who voted for Boris and who voted Conservative at the last election, having perhaps never been engaged with politics, certainly never dreamt in places like the North Wales corridor of voting Conservative, voted for a man that spoke to them in a way they'd never been spoken before, and the system has taken him out. And I think some people will be shocked by what has happened.
When you
and
say
not
the
only that
system,
he's
it
not
was
PM,
Conservative MPs
he's
that-
not an MP.
It was the Conservative MPs that
Well,
deserted him, and that's in the end why he
And
stopped being Prime
that's
Minister.
the whole thing. I think a lot of
Okay.
people will be shocked.
Well, let's hear from some of these people, shall we? Yes, the woman there with the rather fantastic pink hair.
Thank you. I think the main problem we have here is that for the vast majority of people, this is not important. I understand in the Westminster bubble why it's so important. Because he was your colleague, your friend. It might happen to you because, let's face it, no offence, all politicians lie. It's part of the job. But for the rest of us, there are so many important things that are happening. You know, women are in danger, children are in danger, and everything, the oxygen is being sucked out of all the things that actually matter.
Well, it's a very well-made point. We are going to come to other subjects. I have to say, you asked more about this than anything else, which is why we started with it, but I absolutely hear what you have to say.
And this lady is right, but not on one point, which is standards in public life really, really do matter. They do, honestly.
Yes, the young man there in the black T-shirt, yeah. No, further back in the black T-shirt. Yes, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so you say he should be innocent until proven guilty. He has been proven guilty. Everybody knows he's guilty. And to argue that he could still possibly be innocent of this lie that everyone knows he's told, it just feels like denying, like, the obvious truth.
Right. Well, let's hear from a bit more on our panel. Then Charlotte.
I thought I might talk a bit about why I think this matters, because I usually agree with you. I think, you know, Westminster-based stories, process-driven stories can be really distracting, and I think as a political journalist, we do, as a profession, tend to focus on them too much. But I had the report here in full. I wish you'd told me you hadn't read it. I could have given it to you in the green room earlier. But this bit was the bit that really stuck out to me. This attack on a committee carrying out its remit from the democratically elected House itself amounts to an attack on our democratic institutions. And I think that's kind of important, because we all need the systems in Whitehall, in Westminster, by which our politicians are held to account to work. And in a way, this has proved the system is working, because we've got the reports, we've got an outcome of it, and we've got all of this for all of us to see. So we all know what is the case now. But to have someone repeatedly traducing and attacking all of those institutions, I think is something we should care about, because it undermines people's confidence in the checks and balances that are there to keep us all safe.
And were you surprised by quite how damning the report was?
I was, to be honest. I mean, that sentence is quite remarkable. That's a former Prime Minister of our country. I think, was he the Prime Minister this time last year? Pretty much. And then you've got him being accused of basically attacking our democratic institutions. It says it in black and white here. That is remarkable. I've never seen anything like that. I know I'm slightly younger than the rest of the panel, but I doubt anyone on this panel has seen anything like that, really.
Well, and the committee has talked about it being unprecedented, certainly. Let's hear a bit more, because there's so many hands up. Yes, the man there with the sunglasses tucked in your shirt there.
Sorry, David, you've just said that you support Rishi.
Hang on, there's three Davids here.
David, to your
that's
right.
probably me, yes.
TC, we're calling him now,
TC.
just for ease of comprehension.
It's not me.
You've just said you support Rishi, and Rishi wants to bring integrity back to the heart of government. So surely you and Rishi and everybody else got no choice, love or loathe Boris, but to vote to support the report on Monday?
Well, I've already said to you that I support the work the committee's done. I can't be more clear than that. There's a 90-page report there, and I've been visiting various businesses and things in North Wales today, but I'll go through it over the weekend, and I can assure you I take the report very seriously and the work that's been done very seriously, and I don't attack the committee at all.
The woman here in the front.
Isn't Rishi compliant in this? He held office at the same time as Boris Johnson. Surely he was involved in some way.
Well, he was also issued with a fixed penalty, as you remember. So I'll get around there, and I'm going to come back to you, otherwise no one else will get a word in.
So, you know, he certainly wasn't involved in it.
But he was served with a fixed penalty notice.
Because he turned up 10 minutes early for a meeting in a place that he was meant
but
to
that
be
was the decision
for a
of the
meeting.
police.
Yes.
I mean, I thought it was quite interesting what Guito said about depriving Boris Johnson of his livelihood. I mean, let's not forget, this is a guy who has voted 3 times in the House of Commons since he left office and earned £5 million. I think Boris Johnson probably isn't going to go hungry as a result of leaving Parliament. Now, the reality is that the Conservative Party entered into an agreement with Boris Johnson. They knew fine well the guy was a gambler, the guy was somebody who took risks, he was always a bit creative with the truth. And the reality is that the chickens have come home to roost, and we've now got this unkempt man-child who has finally been chucked out of Parliament, and I don't think deserves to return. But I would go further than that. I think that the £245,000 of your money that was spent on legal costs should be recouped from Boris Johnson. I think that the honours list... Bear in mind, this is an honours list. He wanted to give his father a knighthood. I think his honours list should be scrapped. And I think that the £115,000 a year that he's due to get for the rest of his life as a former Prime Minister should also be waived as well. And we should all move on from this sorry saga and focus on the things that matter: the cost of living crisis, the NHS, and everything that matters to people in this room.
I mean, David Linden, since we've got you here, this is obviously a fairly torrid time for the government. It's not been the easiest time for the SNP recently. You're talking about chickens coming home to roost. Obviously, Nicola Sturgeon was arrested and questioned by police, released without charge. But you've now had the 3 most senior people at the top of the SNP arrested and questioned by police.
So we've had this process has been ongoing for 2 years now. There's been 3 arrests and no charges, and I think it's absolutely right that we are transparent and that we go through with that process.
Well, you can't hide it. I mean,
well, we certainly can't.
There was a big tent in the front garden.
There's also the 1981 Contempt of Court Act, which I'm sure you wouldn't want me to breach on your programme, because unlike Boris Johnson, I respect the rule of law, and I'm not going to go and breach contempt of court.
I'm not asking you to. I'm simply saying you're talking about chickens coming home to roost. This is not the easiest time for the SNP either.
And the SNP's getting on with the day job. That's why Humza Yousaf, as First Minister, has tripled that fuel insecurity fund. The biggest issue that faces folk at the moment is the cost of living crisis, and we're getting on with that job.
I think they decided to send her flowers, didn't they? That was...
Who decided, sorry?
SNP leadership.
Humza Yousaf sent flowers to Nicola Sturgeon.
I think most people are right to send flowers to their colleagues at other public.
Do they have something inside the flowers? Is it like an Egyptian?
I mean, if we're going to send things, if we're going to send things to people, let's send, you know, a request to Tony Blair to appear before the International War Crimes Tribunal for invading Iraq. The government you served in.
Right, I'm going to get a few more points before I move on. Yes, there's a woman right in the middle in a green and black shirt there. Yes.
I just want to ask the gentleman on the end, sorry.
Gitter, who used to work for the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister.
2 questions. How does Boris feel cheated? How does he feel cheated? He knows the process and now he feels cheated. It's time he takes responsibility for himself. And like the gentleman said, we move on and stop wasting money on this man.
So the police, who are skilled, qualified, experienced, know the law, know the process, investigated the allegations at the heart of this. They concluded that Boris Johnson was in technical breach of lockdown regulations on 1 occasion in the cabinet room where the cabinet meets at 2 o'clock in the afternoon ahead of a meeting that a teetotal chancellor was also at. And they gave him a 50 quid fine. That's what the police decided was the scale of the crime, the nature of the transgression on this occasion. He paid that 50 quid fine. From that, we went to an inquiry that attributed to him and his leadership the bad behaviour of a whole load of grown-up, clever adults with moral agency, with the ability to decide for themselves whether to drink, whether to do whatever else was in Sue Gray's report. None of them have been mentioned. None of them have been hounded out of office. Boris Johnson has been pinned for the transgressions of all those people. And though he's not teetotal like Rishi Sunak, I bet it'll surprise most of you that he barely drinks. You'd be surprised about a lot of things about him. But his own party, because of the hysteria that would simply not go away about Partygate, and people would not allow him to talk about all the other things that mattered so much more last year, not least his courageous and principled leadership on the Ukraine, They drowned all of that out in a hysterical, myopic obsession with Partygate.
OK, hang on. OK, so Boris Johnson got one fixed penalty notice. Downing Street itself, as you say, all these other smart people, they were fined. This is the most fined household in the entire country. Congratulations to them for the gold medal. And Boris Johnson is pictured with some of those people who have drinks in their hands. He told the House of Commons that he believed that all guidance was followed at all times. There are photos of him in which that is not the case. This is not about whether he had a party. This is about whether he misled the House of Commons. Correct. And it's there.
Ghetto, let me finally ask, as we're going to move on, because as you rightly pointed out, there are things that are affecting people's daily lives quite a lot more than this, and there are other questions I want to come to. Finally, do you agree with the Select Committee that Boris Johnson lied to the House?
I don't see how
yes
you
or no?
can get into someone's head. I don't,
so
in principle.
So you
how
don't
can you
agree
know
with
what
him?
The accusation was misled, answer yes. He corrected the record as Minister.
Well, misled deliberately, which is another way of saying lie.
I don't know how they can say that he deliberately. I don't know how you could attribute motive to people and get inside their heads and decide that. Okay. It didn't matter to the police. Why should it matter to the former leader of the Labour Party who presided over this process?
Shall we move on?
Yes, please.